In this video, I'm going to talk about the controls and capabilities of my new CrossMod delay plugin. This plugin is a stereo multi-tap delay where each delay has two different taps with their own delay in milliseconds and a feedback control for the left and right, which can be routed differently based on the routing mode, which I'll get more into in just a moment. This plugin can also be synced to BPM and be modulated by an LFO. And you have two different LFOs for the left and right, respectively. You have over here the LFO mod type, unipolar and bipolar. This is just for testing purposes thing. In a future release, this will probably go away and be hard-coded to one or the other, but is here now, so experiment with it while you can. Same for this BPM knob, as well as the fact that these tap one times and delay times for all the other knobs are in fractional millisecond values. That will definitely be changed, but is part of how the internal plugin works. It does all its calculations with the fractional values. So that's what's displayed here on the knobs. Again, changed in a future release. So let me just go through each of these controls. I'm going to only talk about the top two blocks here because the right delay and LFO are exactly the same controls as the left. So you have the tap 1 level in dB. You also have the tap 1 delay time. And you can go all the way from 5 milliseconds of delay time all the way up to 2,000 milliseconds or 2 seconds of delay time. The same for the second tap. You don't have a volume control for the second tap, and the reason for that is tap 1 is going to be the tap that is routable differently, which will give you more control over how much of it you want because it will be routed differently. Same for feedback. The feedback will be routed differently. This is a percent. You have from 0 all the way up to 100% feedback. Be careful because anything over 100% or around 100%, you're going to have some clipping issues. Hopefully, and this is, I left this in here and I didn't let it go just to 99.9% just because this is useful for a special effect if you want the sound of something having a feedback loop and growing in volume and distortion. There you go, you have it right here. Next to that you have a dry and wet blend where you can control the wet of the left channel and the wet of the right channel and the dry independently of each other, so you can get a good balance between the two. Below that you have for your LFO, the shape of the LFO, you have a sine wave, a triangle wave, a sawtooth wave, a random sample hold value. So this is a stepped value that is basically sampled white noise. So you'll get random steps of different values for these in between these parameters you set here. And after that, you have a low-pass filtered version of a random sample hold, which will allow for your steps to have more smooth changes in between. So if you think of it, think of it as like a portamento time between different notes, or a pitch bend time that you set like between different notes. It's kind of the same idea, but as for the a smooth change within the different values. And next to that, you have the LFO rate, which you can go from all the way down to nothing at all the way up to 50 hertz, and which is 50 hertz doesn't sound like a lot in terms of like a frequency, but for an LFO, it gets pretty extreme when you get around past 9 or 10, depending on your depth, of course, which I'll get to. Next, you have your minimum delay, So if I didn't mention already, the LFO will modulate your delay time for both your left and your right. So if you have LFO enabled, I know I haven't mentioned this. If you have LFO enabled, your tap 1 and tap 2 times will be the same. In the future, I will display this graphically somehow that these controls will get locked out, because if you have LFO mode enabled, these tap 1 and tap 2 times become meaningless. And it's just controlled by this min and max delay for both taps. And you have the ability to go between 0.3 milliseconds, which again is more useful in this sense now that it's more useful to be fractional here because you can get some interesting effects with delay times that are very, very close to nothing. So anyway, this will basically be the lowest the LFO can go. This will be the lowest value that the LFO can reach. So if you had a saw wave, it would start ramping up from 1.6 or 1.3 milliseconds all the way up to your max delay, which in this case is 200. But we can go pretty extreme here. We can go all the way up to 500 milliseconds from 200. And in the future, I may lower this to 100, but this range of values seems to be the most useful for the LFO delay time modulation, because you hear this more drastically when you have lower time and more than having high delay values, because they'll just be a wash, and you can already get that washing sound with the free and sync modes, which I will demonstrate soon, or not soon. I'll demonstrate now because I've already talked about all these controls. But before going through that, let me talk about each of these routing modes. I'm just going to talk about them because it's hard to demonstrate this with audio. Just for the sole reason of the audio test files that I have very similar information in the left and right channel. If you want, you could try this with a audio file that has distinct differences between the left and right. But anyway, so when you're in normal mode, the feedback of the left and right delays are routed into the left and right delays input as normal, as you would think a normal stereo delay would be. Also, tap 1 is going to be routed into the left feedback like it normally would be, as well as tap right being routed into the right feedback input. Then you have cross feed, where or cross feedback. This is what the X feed, meaning the feedback of the left will be put into the right delays input, and the feedback of the right will be put into the left delays input. The tap 1s will still be routed to the left and right delays respectively, but the feedback is going to be crossed or switched to the inputs of the opposite channels. Next, you have cross pan mode 1, where the feedback of the right or the left and right are routed normally like they would be in normal mode. The difference being that tap 1s are routed to the opposite feedback now. So the delay tap 1 of the left will be routed into the feedback input of the right delay. So you'll get parts of the left and right going into the feedback of the left. So at this point, you're really sort of losing any definition of where the signal was in the stereo field, because you have inputs from the left and right going all over the place, being fed back. And especially when you get to cross pan 2, this is a combination of cross feed and cross pan 1, where the feedback of the left is routed to the right, and the feedback of the right is routed to the left, and the taps are also routed opposite. So have fun with those. Test them out on your own. This is the reason I'm not doing it in this video is because, again, my test files are not the best for that. and it's tough for me to hear that difference. However, try this out on your own. So now I'm going to play a little bit of audio through this, and I'm going to adjust some of these controls and show you the cool effects that you can get by having the left and the right feedback differences, as well as the LFO mode. So first I'm going to demonstrate the free modes and then the sync, which I believe okay. Let me we talk about sync first. You want to hear this, but I want to talk about the. Actually, I'll just play a little bit out of here, and I'll talk about what sync does. Here we go. So this is what dry signal sounds like, and I'm going to put these knobs somewhere. Okay, that's the actual audio style. So I'm going to pull up the left channels wet. Delay. You can hear the feedback differences to the left and the right. Try a different type of signal now. Let's maybe try the clean guitar. So with this one, I'm going to demonstrate the sync. I'm going to set our BPM to 120. Right, this knob will not be here in the future, but pretend that this is getting 120 BPM from the DAW. So I'm going to set my delay time mode to sync, and what sync will do is wherever the value of tap 1 and tap 2 time are in milliseconds, it will snap to the nearest subdivision based on your tempo. So in the future, what these knobs will show is the division that it's snapped to. So right now, what tap 1 time should show is half note here, because half note is 1,000 milliseconds when you're at 120 BPM. So even though I'm at 1062 or maybe 962, I'm close enough to the 1,000 milliseconds that when you're in sync mode, it will snap directly to 1,000 milliseconds and be a half note delay time. Again, early version, right? This will be much more clear in the future once I figure out how to get this text to display that. Again, yeah, this will be independently setting them for each tap 1 and tap 2 times. So let me play a little bit of it and see if we can hear that. Yeah, it's about there. We don't really have a metronome to compare that against. So again, tough to demo, but you can play with that as well. And then let's play with LFO. This one's fun. We get some pretty cool effects to this, so let's go ahead and try it out. Again, or if I haven't mentioned this yet, LFO, when LFO mode is on, these controls, the tap 1 and tap 2, become meaningless. And in the future, I want to have a gray box displayed over these controls to prevent people from changing them, because they won't mean anything. Now, the delay times are governed by these min and max delay, as well as the depth control. So the depth over here in percentage, because I don't think I went into too much detail. The depth percentage will basically be how much will it swing, how much will the value swing between 2 and 200. Because right now, if I had it set at depth set at 100%, the saw wave would go from 2 milliseconds all the way up to 200 every cycle. But if we set it to 50, it'll only go to 100, 25, 50, so on. So you can get more or less drastic changes. And with this, you can get some really subtle things as well. So let's go ahead and give it a try. I'll start with everything dry, and I will pull back the feedback a little bit. And again, these knobs don't mean anything. So we're going to set, let's say, a 0-second minimum delay time, and then a maximum delay time of 200, and then around the same controls for each. We'll put these at sign. Try it out. You can see now why it's important to have this depth control because the effects can get pretty drastic pretty fast. I'm going to pull them up and see what we get. Yeah, at a certain point it just turns into noise. So I would probably refine these ranges soon to max it out at a point where it still sounds like, you know, LFO modulation rather than just noise. But you know, you can go pretty far with this. If you're interested in trying this plugin out for yourself and you're not Will Perkle, who I've already sent the plugin to, let me know, because I have to do those changes and make those refinements, and also make the GUI a little less flashy, you know, a little less attention grabbing, and make it a little more subtle and simple.